In this video, we're going to go over 12 different strategies that a minority or fringe narrative uses, which is the narrative of UFO legitimacy, uses to borrow legitimacy in a variety of ways. The first is brain hacking, which begins with the music. Fear is the easiest and strongest emotion to stimulate. And so the tone of this entire documentary is framed in sinister colors, sinister sounds, in mystery, etc. So that's the first hack. Okay, this is the second hack, which borrows from business. So in our culture, we've learned that business is more important than pleasure. Business people are more important than other people. Whether it's true or not, we've been brainwashed into this message that business is important. So for a marginal story to become more significant, it's got to borrow from business. So a case comes from briefcase. Files are a tool in business. So they're saying that there is a case somewhere with a file in it, with some paper in it. But the association is really important people filing important things away. Now, the next thing to borrow from is science, because we are quite dogmatically invested in the paradigm of a rational, materialistic, scientific age. And scientists do what? They investigate. And so by talking actual, we're talking physical. Investigations, we're talking science. And so, again, a 5-year-old can investigate where the neighbor's toy came from. And that is a real, actual investigation. It doesn't mean anything, but it's borrowing from the legitimacy in science. So here again, we're borrowing from a couple of different things. This is a well-filmed documentary. And so you've got two things revealed in this. Money is the ultimate deity in our cult. And this is revealing in the first few minutes that the people involved here are important people because they've got money. How do you know they've got money? Because this is shot in high definition. Now, that doesn't mean as much today as it used to. It's shot with aerial footage. Again, doesn't mean as much as it used to. But they've got good editing. That still means money because, so you've got synchronized sound, and then you've got MUFON case file. We're borrowing here from the legitimacy of organization. In other words, if this video says Dane's case file or Dane's bits of paper reveals Men in Black encounter, it sounds laughable. Why? Because we delegitimize the individual, and there is a power in groups. Why is there a power in groups? Because even 5 members of a group can overwhelm an individual. We understand that at a deep reptilian brain level, that even a group of 5 is bigger than you. And America does a pretty good job of isolating its people. So you're watching this at home. you're alone. And this group, this undefined group, MUFON, is presenting this. Now, the law of mass says that you as an individual don't want to buck a group. And it's one of the reasons why UFOs can be delegitimized by the cult of government, etc. is, again, you've got a group, an organized power structure saying, this is not real. Okay, so how do you counter that? You can't counter that by saying, well, Dane's got some bits of paper suggesting different things that will help you believe something you can't see, feel, or put your hands on, because we can't put our hands on a UFO. You know, I don't have one lying around for people to inspect and prove, you know, the science and all that. So MUFON is an organizational form of legitimacy.
93.
Okay, so here we're borrowing from chauvinism in the form of male power. So culturally, for hundreds and thousands of years, you know, in a fear-based confrontation, men have stronger bodies than women. Now, in internet terrorism and, you know, gunfire, this is not that relevant. A woman in high heels can learn to shoot a sniper weapon and from a distance of 100 feet easily take down a muscle man, Mr. Universe, with a few rounds. But physically, we feel the memory of a time when the 6'4" male could rape, dominate the 5'4" male, all things being equal, or female, or child. And so you borrow from that authority of mass, of power, when it is a deep male voice. Why a deep male voice? Because smaller bodies and younger bodies produce higher sounds. My voice is not as legitimate as this deep voice, because this deep voice suggests cultivation, mastery of tone. You imagine a 6'4" male. And so you're again borrowing authority from chauvinism, which continues in the choice of interviewee subjects.
San Jose, California. Terry, an amateur UFO.
So here we're borrowing from two things. First of all, this isn't Terry, number one. Number two, sex is the primary attractor, you know, within the chauvinistic paradigm towards women. And so, of course, it has to be sexy. We've also got shadow, you know, a lot of blurred background, which both invokes the fear of the unknown, suspends disbelief, makes it more dreamlike. But the witness, court files show, for example, that a blonde, attractively proportioned woman gets way better terms in court than a black older woman, or even worse, you know, a black male, because we're also biased culturally around black and white. So there are no African American people making the case here. It's white people, white attractive people. Why? Because if you want to have sex with someone, you want to believe that if you want to have sex with them, you want to believe that if you're attracted to someone, you're not attracted to a sociopath. You want to believe part of the cultural narrative and part of the split narrative around sex is that you're, you know, there's something bad about just wanting to fuck someone. But if they're have an education. No, this isn't, arm candy. This arm candy has a University of Washington degree in astrophysics. Now, she's still my arm candy and doing this and this, and I want her doing this, and I don't want her working because I want to feel important. But this is not arm candy. This is a legitimate relationship with a smart woman. And all of that is, tying in with the chauvinism. But still, if the people watching the video say that is an attractive woman, they do not want to then say, I am attracted to liars and sociopaths. They want to conflate attractiveness with legitimacy and honesty.
A researcher investigates the site of an alleged UFO incident.
Now, this is also a very important thing because the defense that can be used to back up every single thing in this movie is alleged. Is it possible? Sources say it is alleged. Some people think, and then they go on to share their narrative. The lack of genuineness comes from the lack of context. Who is the source? How did the information get gathered? Who gathered it? Was there what do we know about the person who shared the information? Their credibility. Have they made up lies before? Have they been subjected to bribery of some kind? Do they have a UFO business such that the more they tell UFO stories, the more sales they make? There's various contextual elements that in a narrative of this nature are intentionally avoided.
In 1993.
So here we come into, if you watch this gentleman, you've got cocky, physically attractive, well-organized, healthy male. And you've got psychologically cocky as well. If you watch his facial gestures, etc., he knows stuff. He's an authority. He reveals secrets, and he's going to tell you. So we're borrowing again from the chauvinism of authority of men, and
she was following up on a report that a UFO had recently landed in San Jose, California.
Now, they could act it out that the woman was actually telling the story. But maybe the woman doesn't look as attractive, or maybe the woman doesn't exude masculinity, and so would be less believed than a man who believes her story. And so this ties into the legitimacy of groups again. One of the things that this video does is it interjects multiple men to verify a story of an experience that isn't told by the people who had the experience. But it nonetheless says, I'm a bright, strong, intelligent, confident male who's allied with an organization. And here's my colleague, another bright, intelligent, strong male. And we believe this woman. And so who are you to doubt us?
And she was starting.
Now, we're borrowing from sensory belief here. This is not the woman, and this is not the bar that she was in. But there is a stereotype that a sophisticated, sexy woman like this is mysterious, is attractive, would be, of course, drinking wine. Now, this is complete nonsense, except for the story that we have culturally that this is what a sophisticated, credible person might be doing.
As she digs deeper into the investigation, Terry arranges.
So she looks intently ahead. So this is, of course, all posing, but it's building the narrative because we believe what we see. We believe that we've watched this environment. The actual environment may be a loud noise playing in the background, a dingy bar, no wine, maybe she's drinking a beer or soda, and no sex appeal. And so then we're like, oh, I'm not interested in this. So we've got a sensory overlay with curated sound and photographs. Again, photographs seem to have legitimacy. All they've done is taken some black and white photos of this actress and snapped them in, but it appears more official. Of course, the dark, the deep voice. So she described 2 men approaching her, but there are 3 men in the video. So why add a 3rd man if there's only 2 men described approaching? And why not see their faces? They're actors too. This wasn't recorded in the actual experience, so why not record their faces? It adds to the fear, the unknown, the fear of the unknown that we have as a culture. We are culturally afraid of the other. 3 men throughout this documentary. Each of them could say the entire narrative, but that would leave the narrative vulnerable to the defense. Well, what does that guy know? Who's that guy? But if you can get 3, 4, 5, 10 people saying it, you can't say all of those people are idiots. Who's that? Who are those people? There's credibility in mass, in groups. And so simply by having 3 people tell the story that is supposedly backing up the woman, they've now lended it an unassailable sense of credibility. I guess here's four people, another guy. And we've got the authority of someone a little bit older in this case.
Psychological intimidation is definitely a tool in military intelligence.
So military, we're bringing in, this poor woman up against her military counterparts. And we're stating, but again, we're not referencing a military document that would lend credibility, that this is what a military interrogator would do in this situation. Now, this also is a hook at this point because what is being revealed at this point is that there's a massive, well-funded, powerful government agency with the willingness to kidnap and threaten innocent women and men, for that matter, who don't do what they're told. And what's being told is forget about UFOs. So there's the perception that if you don't believe this story, you too could be subject to this kind of intimidation. And usually the brain biases towards fear. If something is possible, if the brain sees a wriggling object, it jumps out of the way, not because it is a snake, but because it could be a snake. And if it was a snake, better jump out of the way first and then deal with it rationally later. If it's not a snake, there's no harm. So we're already creating a narrative of emotional connection because every one of us in our culture has been bullied by a larger force, an older brother, a parent, a teacher, a boyfriend, a relative. We've been bullied by the abuse of power. And so, here we have a sexy woman being abused by male authority figures. Well, that also triggers, particularly for men, watching this thing, the hero ethic. I want to rescue her is the instinctive male response. But in order to rescue her, you have to believe that there's something to rescue her from. if you say, I want to rescue this poor woman and fuck her, you can't do so if you say, but there's nothing to rescue her from. So there's actually an incentive on that level to believe the narrative. So now that we've debunked many of the bases of this particular narrative that's trying to gain legitimacy by borrowing in these various ways, I think it's important to understand that there is a small percentage, whether it's 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, somewhere in the 1 to 5% range, where there are credible witnesses talking about experiences that, in doing so, ostracize them and lead to punitive action, and does not benefit them financially, who are not particularly sexy and who don't have deep voices, and that these phenomena, these experiences of beings from another planet, craft from another planet, certainly craft that has not been conceived of or imagined as being from our military, that those experiences are there. And if you look at things like the Disclosure Project or Bob Lazar, where you don't have, at least from those witnesses, as much of this drama around it, there's something to be looked at. And these exact same techniques that are being used to intimidate people into believing this particular story and narrative by these filmmakers are similarly used by governments, including the US government, to intimidate, lie, and dissuade people from looking at certain things. But it's useful to understand the techniques.